So welcome everyone to the October event. Um, we have a really exciting topic to go over with you today, um, and a really amazing speaker who's going to go into remote research planning in today's world. Um, I'm Alicia Warren. I'm a senior advisor at CVS Health, and I help put together some of the Ladies That UX event along with Bree. Bree, do you want to introduce yourself? Uh, Bree, I think you're on mute.
Yes, I was. Multiple screens. Yeah, I'm Bria Bow. I am a senior UX researcher, was previously at United with a lot of my United friends that I see here, woot woot. And I just joined Discovery Education, and I'll be starting in a few weeks. So that's a very recent update for me.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Great. So today we're just gonna do a quick hello. We have a lot of new people in the community, and we wanted to welcome you and also just kind of touch on what the Ladies That UX community is all about. And then we'll hear from our speaker, Rachel Young. And as usual, we'll dig into a little Q&A, so you'll get the opportunity to ask some questions. And anyone who wants to stick around at about 6:30 or so, we'll just do a little happy hour and share, hopefully get to hear some of the stories that you've been experiencing in your day-to-day and how you approach your remote research planning. So really quickly, I'm sure this is old hat for us all now, having been working from home, but just a couple of quick ground rules. Do please keep yourselves on mute, particularly if you're not talking, but we do encourage you to keep your cameras on, especially when we're doing Q&A, because then we can see your smiling faces and put a name to that face. Also, feel free to use the Google Chats to send comments and questions. So Bree will be moderating that, making sure that the questions get fed through to Rachel. And also, we really want this to be a community where we're not just learning and encouraging each other, but also helping each other if you're looking for that next step in your career or new opportunities. So do share those as well with this group. Just pop them into the chat, or if you feel more comfortable, you can email me and I can send it around to the group as well. Yeah, so just to kind of kick things off, we would love to hear a little bit about who your favorite female leader is. So just throw it into the chat so that we can kind of hear a little bit of your voice as well. Brene Brown, that's a great one. All right. Ariana Huffington, love it. Carolyn Chandler. Some really great female leaders to look up to. So if you can't think of anybody now, don't worry about it. We'll um, keep an eye out for your ideas and people who inspire you as we work through today's conversation. Cindy Young, love it. So for those of you who are new, we'd love to connect with you. You can get in touch with us through Slack or email us directly at chicago@ladies@ux.com. Our Slack channel is, I think I say this every meetup, it's a little bit bare bones, but I do occasionally pop in, post open opportunities or events if I see them pop up. So if you are using Slack, definitely get in touch and we'll add you in. And with this meetup, we asked everybody who signed up just a question about where they are in their career, and I thought this was really a great peek into the diversity that our Ladies That UX community provides, not just within, you know, the walks of life that we come from, because UX is definitely full of tons of diversity, but also just with the spread of different levels of experience that we have. So with everybody that from that student level up to really high level lead or kind of in that managerial role. So great to see, and love seeing that we're all, you know, popping in and contributing to the community. And on another note, I know that Pradeep touched many of our lives in the Chicago design community, and we were all very saddened to hear about his passing. And I thought, you know, he came to the Ladies That UX events on a regular basis, and he was very active in our Slack channel. So he supported us as well as, you know, anybody who had learned from him at General Assembly or at the HCI program at DePaul, through Allstate and through Hyatt. He was just, you know, a really thoughtful leader. And I thought it was very appropriate that he also left something for us, you know, in those moments that we can kind of take away to find solace in. So I really liked this quote from him. You know, our emotions are high right now, but be the calm. In these rough times, it's easy to personally feel like your emotions are on a roller coaster with questionable safety standards like the old wooden rickety park rides, and everyone you interact with is also in a similar situation. There is a high degree of uncertainty and emotions are also high. And as a leader, the least that you can do is be calm for everyone else's storm. You want people to feel at ease with you around. And without further ado, we will pass it off to Rachel, who is our amazing speaker, who will walk us through this remote research planning. So I'll shut up now.
Hey, Rachel, do you mind picking presenter? Are you able to present?
Let's see. I don't have a copy of this locally. Let's see.
Okay, I can go through it. I can just kind of, if that works, if for any reason I'm not changing it when it needs to be changed, just give me a little bit. Otherwise, I'll try to keep up with where it's easy.
That sounds good.
Okay, sounds good. I'll stay on running it.
All right. Thanks, Alicia. Thanks, Bree, for inviting me to the event. I'm Rachel Young on my husband Nate Young's machine, so you're wondering why it says I'm Nate Young. I'm really excited to be here. I know some of you, maybe I have worked with you or for you at some point. I know the UX community is a small and loving one, so thanks for joining tonight. I'll start with just talking a little bit about me and my background before we talk about research planning in today's world. I have about 20 years experience in industry, and I've had titles ranging from human factors engineer to user interface designer to usability architect to user experience researcher. I'm currently a senior advisor with product design at CVS Health, along with Alicia here and some others on the call. And really what it comes down to, my background is in experimental and engineering psychology. And in all of those roles and titles, the fundamental thing that I have been most fascinated and passionate about is really understanding how people think and those things that we inherently do and don't do well, when it comes from decision making to memory, visual motor processes, and then applying that to the design of systems. So really, anything that we think of in design of systems, that's the exciting part about this field, is that you can apply your knowledge to a broad swath of industries and problems and domains. So really, I have a lot of Post-its around my house, so I try to put some Post-its here. I like to put my lists of things all over, and each day I just try to learn something new. I also try to share what knowledge that I've acquired, imparting that on others. And with all my lists and things and a planner that I like to be, I really try to embrace creativity. It's a good thing to bring into a field a new way of thinking, and it's great to have creative minds on a team that you're working with. Next slide, please. So a little bit about some of the experiences that I've had. As I mentioned, depending upon your interests, you can go really broad and practice across many domains, or you can go deep within a particular domain. And so over the years, I've had experience in insurance. One particular product there we worked on was a tablet interface for people that have really just lost everything in a natural disaster, whether it be a hurricane or tornado. And so we created a simple way for claims reps to come to them and allow them to get their claim process going in a disaster through a tablet interface. I've worked on interactive voice response systems and some very early GUIs coming from command line interface, not to age myself, but and then I've had some experience working on set-top boxes for cable television and pausing live TV and some of those first interfaces that you see today. And then actually the first start in applied research was in military and battlefield displays, as well as aviation cockpits, working on some of the instrumentation and ways to visualize the battlefield in 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions. So a lot of interesting things to get involved in. Next slide, please. Yeah, so what am I going to be talking about today? Alicia had that great quote from Pradeep, and we really is, it goes without saying that, and you've heard many times, we're living in trying and uncertain times right now, and it pulls us in different directions. And, I would say that maybe you've experienced this even before COVID, but from a research perspective, there's always that push and pull of budget and resources. And probably now you're being asked even more so to do more with less. You may have had jobs eliminated, you may have had budget completely cut, or things restructured. And so planning and conducting research with those limitations adds some complexities, and you may have to change direction or change approach. Along those lines, you may be a researcher that's also trying at the same time to grow your skill set. Maybe practice new methods, acquire new tools, or you may also be asked as part of some limitations or just part of a growing interest in research. I think we're starting to see a real growth in our field too, trying to democratize that across the organization. So training and leveraging the skills you have across designers or product managers so they can do some research independently, and maybe you become in more of an oversight role or spread it across different areas within the organization that do not have dedicated researchers yet. Next slide, please. So in addition to this uncertainty and being moved in different directions, your life, our lives, professionally and personally, a lot of it is happening over Zoom or Google Meets or whatever your tool of choice is, and so that's put a strain on us all. It's caused us to think in more creative ways and adapt. And so, what can we do to easily adapt in our virtual research environment? So I'll touch on some of those things. There are many tools out there to support us. Are there ones that work better than others? I'd love to hear from all of you about that too. Always willing to learn about new ways to use existing things or new tools. And then what are some of those tips and tricks that we have to keep in mind when we're doing remote research to help things be as effective and efficient as we can? It's that additional layer of complexity. Next slide, please. So really, what do I think? I take a deep breath first of all, right? That's always a good thing to do, a deep cleansing breath. And then to really just approach the situation of using that knowledge and the same principles that we have still apply, right? We're still doing research. There's some ways we need to adapt. But the key things, always are planning, right? And in a virtual environment with more complexity and more things that could be uncertain, extra planning goes a long way. And there's different ways you can do that to help mitigate some of those things. Having a good plan to help your team understand what's happening day to day, week to week. What you need from each member on the team and when, and the expected result are really key in planning. If you think about it, we used to have the luxury of just walking over to people's desks and talking to them, and you're probably in your work environment over communicating, over planning meetings and things, so you make sure that things are moving forward. And so doing a little extra step of that within the research can go a long way too. Letting people know ahead of time they're going to need their time for this, dedicated for sessions and debriefs and solutioning. That's all very helpful. You may have recruiting the right users. You may have some difficulty with, if you're using external recruiting firms and things, there may be some additional time sensitivities you need to be aware of. Maybe the recruit might take a little bit longer, or we may have to adapt a little bit more and relax some criteria if needed in these times. So making sure to communicate, as you do with research with your team, about what the needs are, the questions you want to ask, and from whom are your target users. Still keep those in mind. Moderation skills. So, we have, as we go through any remote session, they're fraught with, audio quality issues. You have screen lags. You may have utter silence or even some chewing going on the other end. So, how can you readily adapt to those situations, plan for some of those things, mitigate some of those? And then really just, honing your skills, practicing those skills. I always find if it's a couple months that I haven't moderated a session, I'm doing other things, you feel a little rusty, you want to get back in there and practice. So it's always a good thing. And there are lots of tools. So I think you can look at this as a positive, as a way to build up your research toolbox. Maybe there isn't one shoe that fits all, but you can look at some ways, either if there's some new tools out there or new ways to use existing tools you have. This could be a good opportunity to do so. Okay, next slide, please. So when we talk about, remote research methods, I'm going to talk a little bit about your moderated and your automated methods. And I know there's probably many of you are familiar with these methods and what they are already, but just kind of looking at that, what are some considerations that, not sure why, sorry, this came across as A, those should be bullet points, but as I look at that. As you're looking at these different methods, what are some considerations to be aware of, right? So if you're going to be doing some remote moderated research, having an experienced moderator, right, that has knowledge of the research goals, and there are some additional efforts, right, that might be required in scheduling sessions with participants, but because it's remote, that you can now go broader, right? You can be recruiting people from all over the country, which is nice. And so that may make actually recruiting a little bit easier for you versus some in-person studies. And then when you're moderated, you're also sitting alongside the participant, right, virtually. So you can guide them about, through the flow of the session. You can ask those probing questions to get clarification. And so that's can really help, get deeper insights. When you're dealing with automated or unmoderated sessions, you don't have that back and forth. So it's really key to make sure that those prototypes and stimulus that you're testing are live and stable and can be used independently. Sometimes you may have people that don't always read their instructions, so they kind of veer off the path. Or you may see some situations where some of your target audiences may be more difficult to recruit. People that are doing automated research tend to have a little bit more technical savviness. And so if that is something that might be an issue in terms of representation of your target audience, it's just something to keep in mind. But on the positive note, automated research can be done anytime, anywhere. And you can get your responses and data in a really quick time frame, sometimes hours, within a day. And you can get data from a variety of environments and browsers. And I have here, you'll see little tips along the bottoms of the slides as I go through. I've used these as complementary methods where sometimes I've done a broader automated study to get data, and then I've used that to have a moderated session where I go into a deeper dive with some of those issues that were uncovered through the automated testing. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to talk on the next couple slides about recruiting your users. And, I think the first question we all want to know is determine who they are. Who are we really targeting? In my case right now, I'm working with people that are internal users. And so there's a lot of business domain knowledge that goes within that they have in their head that you want to get steeped in before research. Are they existing customers? Are you trying to embrace prospective customers? Are they very specialized roles that require extra training that you're targeting, or maybe more complex to recruit? If you're looking at, say, specialists in a surgical unit, it's very difficult getting time there. And so just being aware of those roles you're trying to recruit for. And sometimes too, depending upon where you are in your research process, the general population may be okay, right, for early on, and you may be validating some general assumptions and then moving deeper and further refining. And so maybe you can target your more specialized user roles further on in that process. That's a great way to have some cost savings too. How many do you need? I have here, it depends. And that was an answer. It seems I always have lots of times for things. Well, it depends. It depends upon the context, the scenario, right, when you're doing research and design. And in this case, it depends upon the types of research that you're doing. And there's good estimates out there in the industry or ballparks to work from. Depending upon the nature of the study you're doing, we hear formative. Oh, there's my guide. We hear formative versus summative studies. Formative studies are ones done early on to help inform the product design, and they'll really be detecting issues and eliminating problems before that product is fully developed. So there you may have a smaller number, and depending upon the design process, development process that you're using, that could be as few as 2 to 3 for a quick session, 3 to 4, or maybe you're 4 to 6, right around there. And then your summative studies, as you're later in the development process, these could be things that you're really evaluating against more qualitative or quantitative goals, maybe against competitor products. You may also be calling this, validation testing, and depending upon the industry or domain, that can be anywhere from 5 to 8 users per group, upwards of 15 or so if you're looking in a regulated field where you need to have requirements for FDA. So, and also looking at types of studies with card sorts, surveys, those sorts of things, you may be looking at 15 to 30 people per for your representative sample too. So keeping that in mind and being aware of that as you're planning. And then, I've used lots of times too the guideline of, that we hear the 6 to 8 users can identify 80% of the usability problems. And that's a question, I don't know about all of you, but a question I often get posed by stakeholders, especially as they're new to the research and design process. Sometimes they'll want to test with every possible group exactly to the letter. And so really kind of educating them about, no, we really, we want a representative sample. This is how many we need. Those are usually very good conversations to have up front to make sure everyone's aligned. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so going a little deeper into some of the characteristics that matter when we talk about demographics. So, this is where partnering with your product management, your business stakeholder, or your marketing and analytics teams can be really helpful, because they will have data on these sorts of things that you can pull from to help inform your recruiting screeners and criteria. Just some examples that I encountered of just, the vast differences between users from my experience. We've had, in doing medical research, there are certain geographic regions of the country. We wanted to look at devices in comparison to some competitors. And so we had to look in specific geographic regions. We also were looking at the size of the facility, because that dictated the types of specialties in that hospital. And so, being aware of those things. And so partnering with the product manager was very helpful, because they have that knowledge they can share. Well, we want to go here and get these types of users. For instance, another study we did was with Medicaid users. And so really understanding the makeup of the Medicaid population, some being older, some having dependents that are on Medicaid. So understanding how they'll be utilizing that program, their daily challenges, their access and availability to technology, and then attitudes towards the healthcare services that we were conducting research on were all important to take into account. When we talk about bias, really trying to eliminate bias, that's something that we always strive for in our research. So understanding gender differences, being sure to recruit a representative sample of males and females. And in some cases that I had a study with looking at Volkswagen, purchasing the Volkswagen Bug online. This was quite a few years ago. And in that particular case, through the market analysis, they had a very specific target group of females in their baby boomer age that we wanted to recruit and gather their input. Previous owners of the Volkswagen Bug are ones more interested and apt to purchase online. With medical devices, thinking about that in this photo here, we have the nurses has her gloves on, and so we're thinking about hand size and hand strength, and having those gloves on as they're manipulating the device. And you see differences within male and female. And so when we're looking at conducting research on a product that they'll be picking up and lifting and moving, you have to take into account those things and ensure to include those samples in your research, so you can look for differences or any issues or concerns with the size or strength of the hand and manipulating the device. Accessibility, this is another important area, and it's something that is really, I think, coming to the forefront. I see in research and design every day. We had a study with a mobile device, and one of our participants had a visual impairment, and so he had inverted the colors on his device, and it ended up resulting in him not being able to see any of the navigation menu options on the device. So he effectively could not use the mobile application, and it wouldn't have been, without having that participant, we wouldn't have known that was an issue, and seeing his experience and how he had configured his phone to aid his vision. And lastly, perception of brand. I'd be curious to hear how your industries approach this, but some of the experiences I've had were that we would intentionally, recruit. We'd have rating scales and try to look for those that were neither too favorable or too unfavorable. So we could find those, really get to sort of a neutral situation where they weren't coming in with either an axe to grind about something totally unrelated to the the product we were researching, or coming in with a, overly positive, yes, this is wonderful, this is fabulous, right? We want to get to the meat of it and understand that we want to break this and find areas that we can improve. Okay, next slide, please. So when is it okay to use employees as stand-ins? This may be something that you're thinking about with the complexity of budget and time and resources. Can I use people in my office? Well, as I was saying, some cases those are your target users if they're internally using business applications and things. But if you are normally your customers are external, then what are some situations in which you can use them as surrogates? So, definitely if you're looking at the value of features and you need real life context and scenarios, you need to be working with your actual end users. But if you're looking at things, simplified quick wins, things that focus on general interactions like printing or calendar functions, things that are not specific to the particular scenarios of use, then those could be opportunities in which you can test and get data without using, recruiting and using actual end users. But one thing, to keep in mind and that I have found is that, we have to really be cognizant about their time, right? These are our fellow employees. And so letting them know that their time is being used for research during the workday. If it is, the domain knowledge, right? They're going to be very knowledgeable about branding and nomenclature and going to be able to more easily comprehend content than your average user. So keeping that in mind is key. And then their role in the organization. We certainly don't want to be recruiting employees that are on the same or similar teams or have a knowledge of the design process. So there's ways you can successfully recruit internal users from across your organization. We've used internal postings, through Teams channels and other means to create groups, even a research group of participants where people who are willing from across the organization can come and you can broadcast studies that you're running. So there's a lot of ways that you can quickly amass groups of people that you can recruit from as a pool. Okay, well,
I'm going to chime in real quick with a question from our team. Mary is wondering if you've ever conducted accessibility testing specifically targeting deaf or blind people, and if so, could you talk about the goals of the study and what your experience was with that?
Yeah, I actually have not had an opportunity to directly do that. We had, at my previous job, we had an accessibility expert, and she and I worked together to help craft the research plan, and ways to really, it was focused on really just understanding how that person and this group of people use their assistive technology to get into the product, get started with the product. So it really came from a standpoint of more of a contextual inquiry type study, sitting with that individual with their assistive technology and trying to get a better understanding of what are all, how difficult is it to even get started in this application. So my experience was really limited to helping that person frame out what a contextual inquiry type of study could be, and talk about that.
Awesome, thanks. I will move on.
All right, great. Okay, so defining roles up front. So this is part of the planning process that we're stepping into. And when you think about research, everybody has an important role, right? When you think of your product team. And so your stakeholders and your product team members, I don't think I can stress this enough. This happens all the time. It just even happened a few weeks ago too. So where, explaining the purpose of research and their role as an observer. So if you think about it, right, if any of you are like in situations I've been, when people hear research is happening, they get really excited, right? Everybody wants to join in and listen in and hear people's feedback firsthand, right? Because we're all craving that. We're all craving to understand how people are really using our products, right? And having that understanding. So you may end up doing a remote research study with 20 or 30 people popping in or popping out, or even just listening in. And so it's really important, I found, and very helpful to set those expectations. If you're asked to invite a larger group, or even within your product team, having a very nicely crafted invitation, thank you for your interest. You are welcome to observe as many sessions as you are able, but here are the guardrails, right? You're silently listening. You can ask questions of the moderator afterwards during the debrief. We'll have a way to funnel questions at designated points, really reinforcing the fact that we're not just testing with one user. This is not a focus group session. We have multiples of these. There's a defined procedure, and we gather all those insights together to come to conclusions and move forward with design changes or design direction. And so I've created one-pagers, and I attach that to the invitation or the meeting notice that's going out to observers. And, you can reinforce with them also that, struggling is good. And we are intentionally not going to be helping them. And we want to see these places where things are breaking, because that's our opportunity to improve. So I can't stress enough how setting those expectations up front can just help everything run a lot smoother further down the line. The moderator obviously facilitates the sessions, and I'll talk about some lessons learned and war stories from that, and the note taker capturing the data. And so you can really work with your note taker and define a way that works best for you to funnel questions, because you'll inevitably have questions coming in from observers about all sorts of things. And it's really an opportunity too for you to be thinking on your feet and to look at those questions coming in and determine, okay, how can I quickly reframe this into something that makes sense to the user, that can glean valuable feedback? Or maybe there's some things that are coming in just because people are interested and they're like, oh, this is a user, I want to ask them everything. You look at it and you say, there's absolutely no way I can ask this question and gather any insight from it. So, you can't ask everything they ask. And setting aside a time, usually during the wrap up, I'll key in and say, okay, I'm going to take a few moments to see what observers in the room have or on the phone have questions about, and we'll take just a couple minutes to go through some of those additional questions, and then gives you an opportunity to look through that. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so moderating. So what are some of those things we have to think about when we're moderating remotely, versus in person? And I still, after all the years, as I said, even if I haven't done it in a while, it's like just extra practice is always good. Just you have situations that come up each time. It's like a golf game, right? Where they say no game is, there's always, a different experience each time. Moderation always presents a new experience. And so, building from those and practice is always a good thing. So one of the most important things, I think, is really the setup. It's putting that participant at ease, right? Establishing that empathy. You're here to learn from them. They're not being tested. Nothing they can do is wrong here. Being open and honest with feedback. And then really going into setting the appropriate context for them, right? If you think that you're in a remote setting, you have the screen, and then you have information coming up on the screen, and they may have things going on in the background, and you really want to help get them in that mindset of the user and explaining the scenario and giving them time to really, okay, so you're this person, and this happened today, and you're going through this thing, and this is what you see. Oftentimes I've seen people just kind of put up a screen, okay, well, here we go into task one, or what do you think you can do right here? And it's overwhelming, right? It takes just a moment to settle in and understand, because they're putting on a hat and stepping through this imaginary scenario. So context is key. I found it helpful, to, if you're not in a room with someone where they have the task card right there in front of them, giving them some way to reference that, right? Or you'll have them say, wait, what did you say? I have to input this, especially if you have things like that involve a transaction or data they have to be inputting, having that easily accessible for them or keeping it visible alongside the stimulus are helpful. Sometimes I've emailed things right before the moment, before the scenario, and then I've had them, if they needed something to reference as well. Being mindful of your pace of speaking, right? So there may be lags with technology, the audio quality may not be the best, and you're not there in the room to read those nonverbal cues where there's, there may be utter silence and they may be saying, oh, I'm just thinking, or I'm still waiting for it to load. So keeping that pace and including that prompting, I've taken an extra step sometimes to confirm my understanding. So, okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, I heard you say that this part of this thing is confusing and you would like this better, just so you can reinforce that as you're going through. Questions, I have here some sample questions, and this is just good practice to avoid the yes/no responses, things that may be potentially leading, instead of, do you like this? It may be, well, what are your thoughts about this? As you look at this here, what is it that you think you can do? If they're struggling, do you see any other ways that you may try to approach this? So giving it, keeping it open for that interaction with them. And then really, those friendly reminders, right? Life is chaotic for us all behind the scenes. You'll see in some subsequent slides here, but you want to really try to have a location for them that is quiet without interruptions on your end as well as their end, right? I know, just commiserating with some people, we've had shirtless participants. We've had people that have to have Amazon deliveries, and some that go to the bathroom in the middle of the session. So, it's always nice to reinforce, if you need a moment for, a bio break or to grab some water, please go ahead before we settle in. Those sorts of things to try to help mitigate that. And then as my helpful tip along the bottom here, it's always good to start your meeting several minutes early so that you get taken care of your technical glitches and you're ready to go. And then add this into your checklist, right? Turn yourself on Do Not Disturb. Make it, I call, a sterile environment. Shut off any, messaging, pop-ups, those sorts of things. I know that you know to do that, but when it's that morning and you're doing 52 things and you get a call from the recruiter and this and that, it's nice just to have that written on your checklist and knock it off. And turning the beep tones off. You can have those go on for the first 10 or 15 minutes if you have people that are joining remotely. So all just some helpful things to help the session be a little less stressful for you and the participant. All right, next question. Yeah, so what are some other planning and logistics suggestions or tips that I've experienced either painfully myself or have learned from others? If you have technical issues or may foresee that, sometimes the camera doesn't need to be on all of the time, but maybe you turn it on initially. You establish that rapport with them, you say hello, and then you say, okay, now we're going to focus on the task at hand. It depends upon what your needs are, but I've gotten valuable feedback doing that when it's been an issue, or people may not be comfortable turning on their camera. It may be a deal breaker for some in recruiting. Looking at your schedule and planning extra time for you, right? This is fatiguing. We all know being on Zoom and meetings all day long is tiring. So planning that buffer time in between for you to just be fresh, regroup for your next session. Also for people that are joining later or have that connectivity issues. I've done a couple of different things. I've had either the recruiter or myself have created step-by-step instructions for the remote tool that you're using and sent those to participants ahead of time. Sometimes with your recruit vendor for an extra fee. They can go ahead and do like 15 or 20-minute WebEx setup sessions with your participant to make sure they can get on and they can share and do all the things that they need to do before the call, so that when you start your session, you guys can get going right from there. Or sometimes you extend another 15 minutes or 20 minutes and you spend that first session and you tell your observers to join at 1:15 instead of 1 p.m. So you've kind of ironed that all out and you're not struggling with connectivity with 20 people watching and listening in. And having backup plans, right? In worst case, if somebody has something that's blocking a plugin or they can't share or you cannot share, there's different ways you can do things. If someone is not able to remotely work off your desktop and control a prototype, you can control it with them telling you what to click on. Or if you have static screenshots handy, you can bring up and you can talk through. So just having that at the ready so that you can still make use out of a session, because it's valuable time for you and for the participant and for everyone that's watching. And then, just to borrow something from the world of dance, my daughter's dance always has tech rehearsal week before dress rehearsal week. And so I have started employing, tech rehearsals, which are really just dry runs just of the equipment and technical setup, putting those steps in your moderator guide and just making sure that's good. So that even when you're doing your dry run, right, that could be with a actual participant, or it could be another team member or someone outside the organization. You're not wasting their time fuddling through the technical setup. You can use that time to get right into the meat of the research. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so that brings us to the tools, right? There are so many tools out there. I can't keep up with all of the different tools. I wish I could, and I'm trying to learn about more, but there's new ones coming out there every week. We have specialized tools for diary studies or card sorts. We have these really robust tools where it's like one platform does it all for you, that can do really comprehensive, can do mixed methods. We have a multitude of remote meeting and collaboration tools, right? I can think of just off the top of my head 3 or 4 different tools for communicating. And then there's your additional lab, hardware and software. If you have mobile labs or robust lab setups at your office that now need to be virtual. So, just some things that I have learned really just to look at what you need and find out what works best for your needs and your budget. Some of these tools can be quite costly, and you'll find, as you use them, that depending upon the size of your research organization, there may be limitations about the number of studies and things that can be happening concurrently. And so it's just really to look at those with, a keen eye, and then determine what's best for you and your team. I've had, some that are more robust, but there's a bigger learning curve. So finding out how to use the ins and outs of it, and maybe they offer a lot of flexibility, but maybe, they do some aspect really well. For instance, I think of one that allows you to do mixed methods, and it gives you so much flexibility in the research, but then like the aspect, if I'm doing a card sort, the analysis is just not as clean and simple as maybe a tool that's just for card sorts and tree tests. Sometimes when you're mixing tools together, there may be hiccups that happen. I've had situations where if a participant doesn't press something to close it out, none of the data gets saved as it moves from one tool to another. So just keeping an eye out for those things. What are all the ways in which you think you may need to use the tool? And then, do you really need the one with all the bells and whistles? There's a lot of things you can do by putting some of the tools you have existing, using them in different ways. I still use Excel and Word for note-taking. I know there's many different tools out there, and maybe your Google Suite just suffices and does what it needs to do. So just, keep, it's always good to understand how tools can be used, and just try not to be wooed by that one, the thing that claims to do it all, because you may find that you can look within what you have to put things together. Or maybe the tool that does it all is exactly what you need. But speaking of putting tools together to do research, so I'm going to end on this note, and this is a great line from Bree: "Get scrappy, not crappy." So, as you look at this, you may be like, "What? This doesn't. This looks pretty scrappy." But as I said, you're looking at the back end of the things, right? This is the chaos going on behind the scenes. For a recent study I had to put together on a physical device, physical product, I had here a step ladder that I pulled in from the garage. I had a floodlight I pulled in because it was really key to get lighting, the accurate lighting for the color and branding of the product to render correctly, remotely. I had extra TV trays I brought up for extra surfaces. And so I had just a simple webcam with an adjustable tripod, and I used my masking tape to mark an X on the desk, so anytime I lifted and moved it around, I knew right where to put it back. I had aspects of the session that were purely with the device, and then we shipped it over to a prototype on the web. So I had my laptop for my face-to-face conversation, then I moved over to the device, and then I came back to do some interaction with a prototype. So just had different setups. I had a phone charger. I was on my phone with WebEx calls, so you never want to run out of battery. Using old-fashioned clipboard and paper and pen for taking notes. So you can, put all these things together to make a pretty good setup. From it serviced the need well, and we got actually very good data when we thought, how is this going to happen? Because these are studies that had been predominantly, if not solely, in person prior to COVID. So yeah, you can create a professional research environment, as I said here, without letting them see how the sausage gets made in the background. So I'd love to hear about creative ways that people here on the call have conducted research. So I hope we can get to some of that too. So yeah, that's it. So open it to questions.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. I'm going to ask just a few questions, and I have some from the chat as well. If anyone has additional questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat, and I will get to them. So since we do have such a mix of seniority levels, people starting their career, advancing their career, switching a little bit up, can you tell me a little bit about your experience with your career growth, how it has grown, and then how you see different paths for growth within the research industry? I know personally I've seen it change a lot. It's not just a path to management. There's, paths growing vertically as well as horizontally in your skill set. So kind of what has your path been, and what do you see in the industry?
Yeah, I would completely agree with that, Bree. I have always, I kind of look back now, and I think I'm just in this period of kind of reinventing myself and just going where my interests are. And it's been great that there's an opportunity wherever it may be. I had really started out, I'd come from that academic world of research into industry, right? So I was doing really a combination. Your generalist, whatever you may be called, your user experience practitioner. I was doing research and design. And that's probably where I had been for a good part of my career initially, is doing a little bit of everything. And then I really started, and I would say I saw the industry kind of break out into this architecture role or lead role, and starting to see groups of researchers form, which I think you're starting to see now. You're starting to see where user interface design was evolving and growing. Now I think you're starting to see research organizations mature and grow. And so to be a dedicated researcher, I really said, I really want to focus in on this area. And so I was able to just kind of focus in more on the research and really learn more about methods, practice more methods, and then can really take it to domains. Like I'd always said to myself, I really want to explore more of the health-related industries. And so you can branch into that. And within each of those, there's unique requirements, unique ways in which you conduct research. So you can really reinvent your entire career. I did a very short stint with medical devices before coming to CVS Health, and that was like a completely brand new career. It's much, there's so much more about ergonomics and anthropometrics to learn about with research and guidelines around that. And then being highly regulated, it is a very different way to approach research. So you can really, I think, reinvent yourself based upon the industry, based upon the processes being used, right? XP and Agile they have some of the same foundations that you see, but a very different way of working and applying your research skills in a very, fast-paced environment. So there's certainly the ability to do that today. I would also say that there is this vertical too. You can really, you can become, there's like this practitioner level doing the heads down in the field research. There's also the strategist level that you're starting to see, the UX research strategist that's maybe setting the roadmap for the next 6 months or year with your practitioners helping to execute that. There's the management aspect, both from a logistics and coordination side, which I had spent some time doing, making sure that the team has the tools, the resources, the processes, all of the scheduling, keeping it running like a smooth machine. And then there's the management aspect from growing the researchers' skill sets and making sure that they're leveling up and continuing to grow in their role. So I think there's a lot of possibility there. I do.
Awesome, thanks. We have a question from the chat from Maricel. It says, I'm the first researcher at my company and helping to grow the UX research practices. Something that I struggle with is how to plan for research activities. I want to focus on a specific project and a specific scope, but UX could dig deeper into user experiences and explore beyond the project. How do I go about introducing this without overpromising results, especially when resources are really limited and could affect the success of those long-term goals? So if that makes sense, like a little bit about what is the goal of the research, how do we stretch it a little bit without overpromising, because we don't always know what we're going to get from it, right?
Sure. Yeah. So congratulations on being the first researcher. That's an exciting position to be in, because you can really help grow the organization from there. You can help lay the foundation, and you could be the evangelist. So that's an exciting time. But I know it's probably stressful at times too, especially being a team of one. So I would say in terms of planning for research activities, it's always great. I've used like one-pagers when meeting with people to make sure you're covering all your bases. What is the goal? What are the goals here? Who do we want to test with? What do we have in terms of our product or stimulus to test to? Having a nice, simple plan to make sure everybody is aligned. But when you're talking about, if you have something with a specific scope and really wanting to kind of stretch there too, you can certainly over time, I think, make sure you cover the goals of the product and the questions at hand. But if there are further reaching things, you can ask in more of an interview type of format about some of those further reaching things. What are your thoughts about this? Or let's talk a little bit about your experiences doing this. What are some ways that you struggle with that today? Incorporating those sorts of more general open questions that are getting towards those longer term goals. You can build those into your sessions and start gathering that data. And then over time, you could say, oh, we looked at this group and here's their thinkings about these things. We should really start focusing on this offering because they're really struggling with this aspect of something. So I still think you can touch on that as part of your project.
Awesome. This one's really interesting. It comes from Poonam. So research for new product comes from some hypothesis. In your opinion, who should the hypothesis come from? Should it be a researcher, a stakeholder, users, sales, or someone else? Kind of where are those hypotheses coming from, and how has that worked in your experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think they can come from several different areas. So as a team, product team, you should have, right, someone from marketing, and you may have someone from your analytics team. You have your business goals and your vision. You have your research and your development. You can be funneling in that data. You may see things coming in through your analytics that may pose problems and areas for. You may have a hypothesis about that, like, wow, people are really dropping off here. I think it might be because of X, Y, Z. Let's investigate that. Or you can have things coming from your own research, right? That things are coming out of the research and you're saying, okay, that's something I want to evaluate later. So I really do think that they can come from all different areas of your team as you're collectively looking at what the research goals are. You can have coming from data coming in from users, coming in from your analytics, coming in from your business partners. And I think as a researcher, you're at that point to really help facilitate that discussion and get everyone aligned to here's what we'll focus on now. But I don't think it's in a vacuum as you just saying I have all these hypotheses. It can be coming from many different data sources.
Awesome. And another one was about kind of the research repository or vault. Like, how do you keep research? Do you keep it kind of publicized and democratized to be able to scale, cross-reference? What has your experience been like that at different organizations? Because I know it's always like a big question for a lot of us.
Yeah, and I see you, Phoebe, and I think when we worked together, we probably were working on some repositories. It has been, there are some tools out there. Some that do better jobs than others. I've used just some simple ways, some Excel, and using it creatively, as well as some ways in Teams. We had some success with Microsoft Teams. And so that is a challenge that we all face, right? We all do this great research, but organizations are so siloed. And so you may find out, oh, well, we did that already, or you're starting a project and you find out there was insights over here that never got used. So I think the key we had some success with this at my last job using the Teams platform. And the way we did it was just to make it easy for researchers. Make it so it's not a barrier, right? Because you're working quickly, you're going at a breakneck, moving from project to project and research study to study. And so when do you really have the time to put that all into a brief or some shareable format? So, and depending upon the product you're working on in the team, they may have different deliverables, different types of needs, and people don't really have time to pour through a 30-page PowerPoint presentation. So we created a pretty simple way. It was a single-page template, and it just said, here's the date of the study, here's the researcher, here was the goal, here were the findings, all bulleted, one page. Here's a link to the screener, the plan, the deliverable. And so it took about 10 minutes of people's time, because usually you had some executive summary in your presentation. We said, hey, researcher, just put this into this format. And it was searchable. Teams already had this nice searchable thing that we had a wiki that others were using, so you could get to it. Wasn't, super complex, but it serviced a need and it started to share those insights. So I would say, look at the tools that your organization is already using to communicate and share and collaborate. See if you can build something off of that. And if you make it as easy as possible for researchers to use, and just satisfy from your, understand who your audience is, right? Who's going to be coming in to look at this, and what are the key things they're most likely going to want to use? Are you going to have developers coming in? Are you going to have business people coming in? Are you going to have other researchers coming in? And just try to make something that's consumable for them.
Awesome. So that's all the questions I have in the chat. If anyone just has, oh, wait, I just got one. Great. As a new member of the UX team, how do you know or decide if previous research is still valid? Awesome question. So kind of the lifeline of research, and when you need to maybe redo it or reevaluate research. Great question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say you could look at, what if there are new products or new features or functions that have been added, if things have significantly changed, if the user base has changed or the needs have changed. Look at some of those things to say how much still applies. And maybe it's a portion of that, and you can say, you know what, we added this new functionality, or we're targeting this new audience, so we want to do some additional research with them. It can be, things can change, or if a business process has changed, right? Getting additional insights, or if you have a product that's out there, right? That's a great opportunity if you're going to be to start with research. Well, let's understand what's working and not working with it before we move forward. So I would look at that. I would look at, as the audience changed, or you're bringing on additional users, has the functionality changed, or a business process changed, or something in their environment that may have changed that could bring up new needs and areas for opportunity for them.
Awesome. So now I am out of questions. Anyone feel free to jump in, unmute themselves, ask questions.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to call this the happy hour. Anyone that wants to stick around and chat, catch up if you see some familiar faces, feel free. We'll keep it open for a little bit and keep reaching.
Thanks, everyone, for your time and great questions. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, would love to hear from all of you about some cool things or new ideas that you have too.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I know for me, it's really interesting to hear about the different paths, right? Like for UX in general, I just think we have such a asset because most of us didn't do an undergraduate degree in this. We were skilled in something else and got into this. So I think for me, it's always really cool to see how our career paths have gotten to UX research or design or whatever that may be. And like I said, seeing what career growth looks like and how that's changing. It's not only being a people manager anymore. You can grow your practice, you can grow your skill set. Like you said, you can get into different types of research and how it contributes to products. So really cool. So if anyone else has like an interesting, career path through into research, that'd be cool to share as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I can speak a little about that. I didn't want to be UX researcher, but somehow because I'm only UX on my team. Actually, we have in my company. It's a little weird because all front-end developers are called UX designers and UI designers, and there is no really specific line between UX and front-end development, and that was the most confusing part for me when I joined the company. And then very soon after I started, I figured out that I will be only one who can do any research or usability testing or anything related to real UX process. And they're expecting from me to set up that real UX process in the company. And I'm a little struggling because I'm not senior level or anything. I'm in this world really short time, 3 years, and then I'm still learning. So I don't have any strong support in my company doing that. So we're all still learning new things and process, and especially UX research, actually. And I'm struggling the most, how to convince senior leadership to give us opportunity to do UX research or testing or anything. So that's my biggest struggle, and working on that to tell them what's the value of research and testing after we deliver something. That's because in my company is always just build. That's mentality. Build just develop, and design team is working couple of iterations ahead of development, but sometimes they don't give us enough time and then there is like a conflict why we didn't deliver something on time, but we didn't sometimes even have visibility of what needs to be built, and all this is like rush. So that's my story, like coming to UX research. But initially, my passion is UI, so mostly, but so far I'm enjoying it, really.
Yeah. I think we all kind of struggle with that, right? Like not having the timeline for research, not having the buy-in. And I know, especially for like the timeline and what they allow you to do versus what you wish you could do. Like I've always said that, especially as a researcher, like you have to do kind of what's expected, or like if they only have time for a validation study, like you're not going to stomp your feet and say, well, no, you didn't bring me in to do iteration, so we can't do validation for you. Like kind of like working with what they ask you to do, but then also showing them like, well, if we came in a little bit earlier, we could have done this methodology that saved us time and money, and that made us move faster and could give you better insights earlier so you didn't spend so much time at the end. And so kind of giving them a preview of what they could have gotten if they had involved you earlier and more often, I find is really helpful to open that door. So, you know, giving them something that they can appreciate from that research that they asked for, and then also giving them a preview of what they could have gotten if they brought you in a little sooner, I find it helpful. Yeah. Does anyone else have tactics that they've done? Because I know a lot of us deal with that.
Yeah, I'm Poonam. Hi. Thank you for the great presentation. Actually, in my workplace, we just try to create hooks for research. Like I asked the question for the vault because that's the place we also use some Excel or some software like that and save everything there. So whenever the product owner needs some information, they come to me and ask. And I see, let me dig into my vault and check if we have some information. And then from there, I try to make a hook to create a new user research because I don't have enough information in my vault. So and also we have developed a membership group which is called CAC, like Customer Advisory Council, and anyone who is very close to like who wants to develop the things with us, because it's for them, we are making the stuff for our clients. So if they want their pain points to be resolved by us, they are most welcome to join that, and they are the first people we approach if we are developing a new functionality or anything new we are thinking about. We just reach out to them first. That's why they are prioritizing our list, and that's usually they always say we don't have time, we don't have money, but that's the hook which is with a small functionality. Let me check my CAC members, what do they say? Send them the quick note or show them some couple of screens. Yeah, that's what we do in our systems.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I guess the only other thing I would add in there, Natasha, is if you can find an ally somewhere else in the organization, right? Maybe it's someone in product management, or it's someone that has the same mindset. You know, they don't have to be a UI UX person. Even partnering with them can help kind of drive things through the organization too. So I'd say look for allies, people that you can work with to help spread.
Yeah, I'm doing that, and they start asking me like, can you make this screen for tomorrow? And I say like, for tomorrow I can prepare for you maybe paper sketches, but for like really something that you can use and that brings value to our product, you need to wait a little bit and give me time to find solution for you. Yeah, that's that mentality. Yeah, but we are working to improve that actually, because it's really hard to change that mentality where UX practice is not like set up.
Yeah.
Really hard.
Yeah, it is difficult. And I think, in those cases, small victories go a long way, and it may take time, but if you can build on those, if you can get, something to get a study in where people can actually see it, that can build on itself. Or, you know, any process or template you can put into place that can help, you know, help you too to spread things so all your resources aren't being reinvested each time. You know, anything you can templatize or simplify can help some
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, actually, I'm doing that, and also I'm giving a presentation all the time to like different product managers, working with them to convince them and say like, if we do this, we can have these results, and we can build better product, and we can do a lot of things to deliver something really valuable to our users. And then they participated in some of my sessions, and they were so thrilled. It's like, oh, we never did this. Maybe we could do it in the future. They're really excited when I have a report for them. It's like there is a lot of insights, and they can use some of that data for some backlogs and for future work also. And they're figuring out that, so we're going a little like a step by step in that way.
Yeah, and then when it catches on like wildfire, and then it's a good problem to have, but then you're like, oh my goodness, everybody wants some, right?
Yeah, exactly.